I thought I would share with you my recent inspiration around World War One, and how that's informed my usual grasshopper approach to plunging into different periods, just because I happen to have something in the garage with all the requisite miniatures I need. And this is going to be around how I basically found a bag of Great War miniatures from North Star sitting in my garage and realised that they could come out of the lead pile, or at least move slowly in that inexorable journey towards an actual game, perhaps rather than ever being painted, but hey ho. This isn't mine, of course, but it just gives you a sense of why I think everyone just steers well clear of World War One miniatures and Wargames, because you assume, who's got the time to build an actual trench, and even if you do, what's the fun of playing across that? I mean, what are the chances of ever crossing that in an hour and a half with any meaningful tactical decisions? And we had actual history teachers showing us Blackadder goes forth, in the 90s, as if this was somehow actually valuable history, which gave us an even greater sense that this whole period, the whole World War One, was just one massive debacle of pointlessness and imperialism gone mad, and that translates into into the wargaming element of it. It's all just a bit pointless, and trenches and a mire and Passchendaele and the Somme and whatever. But then I started coming across a few things that made me start seeing things a little bit differently in terms of World War One itself. There was this episode on BBC Sounds of Things We Forgot to Remember by Michael Portillo, where he basically speaks to a few people who say, yes, 1916 and all the big battles you learn about where, thousands of Brits crossed out of their trenches with badly formed plans and get basically mown down by German machine guns. That, yes, that was true, but, what were they supposed to do? The Germans had sort of dug in, having invaded France. They dug in deep, built amazing trenches, and, the French and the British were just trying to work out ways of getting through it, and they cocked up, frankly. But then they came up with, new tactics and tanks and new technologies and things, and they did actually break through, and once they broke through, the Germans were weeks away from actual defeat, and all the stab in the back theory stuff around how the German army fought bravely and could have kept fighting on, but only collapsed because of socialists and people that the Nazis didn't like back home. When they look back at World War One, well, it wasn't because of that. The German army was, basically going to collapse. And then I listened to recently, this is all over months and months, and reasonably recently I listened to an episode of this fantastic podcast, The Rest is History, where these two, very deep but quite fun-filled historians talk about all manner of things, and they looked at the Western Front and they basically agreed with everything the Portillo documentary had said, that actually there were some interesting kind of battles and skirmishes as the British broke through the German lines and pushed through, and that's why the Germans had to surrender. And that gave me a sense that actually maybe, there were some reasonable skirmishes to be had. And I saw 1917, which was a fantastic movie where basically the camera pans behind these two blokes on a mission, and the camera doesn't stop following them, giving you a sense of this, ongoing exciting journey. And they sort of run over trenches and they run through forests and encounter Germans and the devastation as basically the Germans are pulling back. So it must be after the British have already started kind of punching holes in the German line. So that kind of Passchendaele and Somme period is over, and I think in the film they refer back to it, saying, "Oh, wasn't it terrible?" But as the Portillo documentary brings out, it's a piece of British history no one really remembers. And I think in one of the podcasts, The Rest is History, they said, there were greater British victories, like single-handed British victories, that really, pushed through and ended World War One in 1917, 1918, then to the degree Britain had a role in World War II towards the end. And then I saw that there was a set of quite professionally produced skirmish rules for World War I called Blood and Valor, obviously by Americans because they can't spell Valor. But hey ho, they also, I think they're the same lot who did Blood and Plunder, which are a really fun looking set of pirate rules. And I watched a very professionally produced as ever Let's Play on tabletop of this Blood and Valor game, and it seemed to be, about the same level of complexity, i.e. not very complex, as Bolt Action, a World War II game, but this one aimed at World War I and a lot smaller, kind of 25, 30 figures aside for a reasonable game. And I thought, you know what, this looks all right. To play, you basically just need a couple of units of riflemen, 8 figures each, a kind of Highlander assault team. I suspect they don't have to be Highlanders, but one assumes they were the ones happy to go over and scream blue murder for Braveheart Scotland. But anyway, I'm sure they could be any nationality. They must be Canadians. I'm sure they fought in World War I. A command team and some kind of machine gun team. I'm not sure how the machine gun team figures in the rules, because it must just cause mayhem and suppressive fire and being able to take everyone out. So I'm not sure how that works if you've only got 2 units of riflemen. But anyway, I'm sure it's been thought through most carefully. And I figured, hang on, in the garage, didn't I pick up second-hand some box, well not a box, just a bag of just lead, either at a show or from Lead Adventure Forum. I'm sure I just picked up a bunch of British World War I soldiers, or British Empire soldiers. And so I took that bag out the garage, and it seemed so unpromising, but there were 20-something figures in, and I organised it into the same way as I'd done the as I'd seen in the starter packs. And there's 4 guys over there to go over the top, the aggressive ones. I forgot what they're called, the kind of Sturmtruppen English equivalents. Those are artillery guys, we're not going to need those. We seem to have the entire high command, including what must be colonels, majors and general types, which I can't believe we're going to need, but they do look pretty funky. That's a very British Civil War kind of 1920s adventurer. I'm sure we can use him, put someone to go over the top. We've got 2 units there, you can see on the right and the left, with infantry guys, and I think they were called Vickers machine guns, can't remember. And you can see the 3 guys in the front would be the command group, and so we've basically got everything except for the heavy machine gun, which we can pick up metal, I'm sure. And things come back to me. Lewis guns, that's what those things were called, those machine guns. So there's the 3 command, infantry unit number 1, infantry unit number 2, the entire command including Douglas Haig, times about 3 or 4 over there. I suppose all these public school boys will look the same. There's nothing wrong with that. The artillery I'm sure we won't need, and I can't remember what they're called, what the Brits called them, not Sturmtruppen, whatever they're called. It was also quite useful just to go through my kind of box of bases and pull out the 20mm round bases that just seem to be sitting there because they're not really suited to anything else. The kinds that you get in the Wargames factory kind of plastic box sets, and some of the Manta Games box sets as well. And some wooden ones as well, you can see in the back. Now obviously I don't have anyone to actually play with, so it would be bonkers to then go and get a second set. And I don't know if the actual official figure line for Blood and Valor are compatible with what I've got. I think they're a little on the big side and slightly differing looking sculpts, because these look like they've been done on ZBrush rather than hand sculpted. I think A.D. Morrison might have sculpted the metal ones that are North Star cells. There seems to have been an explosion of love for World War I in 28mm recently, and I'm sure these Wargames Atlantic figures can also be bought from North Star miniatures. I'm not sure what I think of them. I mean, they probably would scale all right with the Great War ones, albeit slightly different looking. So you'd clearly go for the later war ones. I suppose if they were a different side, they'd look alright. Gas. There's no fun in that though. I can't imagine there's too much of a role for tanks in Blood and Valor, given the scale we're talking about, as these, breakthrough weapons over the trenches. But I remembered that Wargames used to do these resin tanks for World War One. I mean, completely isolated from anything else because they had no rules and no infantry line as far as I knew. And so these look quite fun, but I can't find them at the moment, so I don't know whatever happened to them. I don't know if they're available anymore. I mean, these are pretty big tanks. Fun though they look, and fun there might be to have one. I suppose you could always have one as a objective type thing, get to the recover the crew from these tanks stuck in no man's land. I think these things used to break down a lot. But these are pretty good figures. It looks to me that they basically scale perfectly with the kind of cobblestone castings type figures, the artisan miniatures type figures. Probably a lot of the Warlord Games type, figures. Probably a teensy bit smaller, but not much. Than the Warlord plastics, but about the same size actually as the metal ones. I'm trying to think of any Rangers that I've got that I could say. So throwing one out there like the kind of Nick Collier assault group, World War II Japanese and American Marines, similar scale to that. Probably about the same scale as the Warlord Games Australians in the Pacific types and Hungarians for World War II, about that scale. So who knows if this will go anywhere? Who knows if I'll ever see a game? But it was fun to get something out of the garage and imagine what I'll get. I mean, I haven't got the Blood and Valor rules, but if I can pick them up for a reasonable price somewhere without too much postage, I think I will. Keep well, keep safe, and speak soon. That's what they're called. British trench raiders.